Hello, welcome back to Saints and Sinners Alike. I am Robin, and I'm going to be sharing the rest of my story. So part one was really long, and there were many pauses. I'm sorry about that. I'm still working on trying to figure out what products work for me and what don't. So just bear with me here in the beginning, and I thank you for coming back. So let's dive in. I left off with, them telling me I was going to have to retake my junior year indicator. And I started doing bad things and stuff. So my mom just had it, and she gave me an ultimatum. She said, you can either go do what you're supposed to do and go through summer school to get caught up and then take your senior year, or you can go to military school. And I think she was trying to scare me or something. But I chose to go to military school because it was a 6-month program. I would get my GED, and then I could do whatever I wanted, right? Like, I'm basically free. And she told me she would emancipate me, which never happened. But yeah, I did get my freedom at 17, 18. Anyways, so I go to military school, and obviously it was very physically demanding, emotionally demanding, and spiritually demanding. So what they do at a military school is, usually it's the kids that are ordered to go there through like courts, or they have nowhere to go, or what have you. So I went to this place in Rantoul, Illinois. It's a small town, but it was an old Air Force base that had the program. And so I was used to, again, being around a diverse culture by this time, because I had been in Decatur for a little while. And so when I got to military school, there was about 150 of us that started on my team. Now, there were 8 teams that were separated, and 2 of the teams were girls. And so it was Team 9 and Team 10. I was Team 10. Whoop, whoop, Black Widows. You'll probably see them somewhere commenting. But anyways, we started off with 150 girls. And even though there was 8 teams, they retired 2 of the team numbers for some reason. I don't remember. It's been 20 years, sadly. Don't tell anyone. Anyways, I drank a lot of water. My mouth gets dry. I'm on weight loss medication and ADHD medication. So, anywho, what I was saying is we started off with 150 girls, and by the end we graduated, I think, with 42. And I was one of 5 white girls on the team. There were a good mix of Latina girls, but mainly most of them were black girls and the ethnic group was from Chicago mostly, and the white girls were from like little towns here and there. So, anyways, I get there, and immediately so for 2 weeks it's called it was torture. I don't know. So it was like Hell Week, of like when I played volleyball and stuff like that. It was kind of like that, but on steroids, because it was military school. So they smoke you, which is physically train you all day, pretty much, for the first 2 weeks. They treat you like just flies on dung. And what they do is they're trying to weed out the people that aren't going to be obedient, aren't going to listen, aren't there to better themselves. And so the first 2 weeks you lose a lot of people. And so I think we lost like a third of our team. Then over time we lost another third, right? So what they do is they break you all the way down to where you just feel like, why am I even here? You know, and you're actually questioning these things and like, what do I want out of my life, and stuff like that. So things that I had never brought to the forefront of my brain at this time, mainly because I was just too busy having fun, being social with friends. Okay, this is when it got serious. Like, what do you want? You know, and they were demanding of us to figure that out. So first they just completely degrade you and break you all the way down, but then they start to build you back up the correct way. And so I am so thankful that I went to Lincoln's Challenge Academy. It has changed drastically over the years. I think there's only like 2 or 3 teams at this point, and it's very hard to get into. When I went, of course, like, we didn't have much resources. I mean, we did through the National Guard, but they weren't as great as they are today. And so anyways, I'm thankful for them because they showed us a lot, and they made sure each one of us girls held a leadership position on the team, at least for a week, and some more, right? We marched every day back and forth to our classes for GED, and those lasted 4 hours, I think. And so from the time we got up, which was 5:30, I believe, we would go outside, meet as a whole entire camp, LCA, right? And we would do physical training with all the teams, and then we would run, usually. Like, I think we did 3 miles once, but with the with what do we call them? I don't remember. Anyways, I had so many good memories of this place because over time you get so close to those women that you struggle with, you know, like when you struggle together and you struggle as a team, and I'm talking like if somebody got in trouble, we all got smoked. So everybody's looking out for everybody. Everybody's trying to like make sure, you know, we get smoked the least as possible. And some of us would be put on what they called restriction. Okay, so if we got in trouble, then you'd be on restriction, and it's usually for a day, right? The longest I was on it was a week. We'll get there. And it's like this jumpsuit that is like a really rough material. Kind of like a Carhartt weatherized, you know, whatever. Anyways, it was a complete jumpsuit, and me having sensory processing issues, like I hated being in that thing. Okay, so because I was one of only like 5 white girls, I knew coming in that I'm just going to keep quiet and do what I have to do and get through this, right? And try to establish friendships and to always carry integrity. So like, I'm not snitching on anybody. I'm not in anybody else's business. I don't care about anybody else. I'm here for me, right? And over time, you know, we got close with some of the girls, and I'm still thankful to this day. We all keep in touch, and we had some of the best cadres. And so, Sergeant Waxham, thank you so much for being such a wonderful cadre. Senior Airman Bonham, I'm sure she's higher ranked now and retired, but she was one of the absolute best as well. And she really wanted us to shine, so she was hard on us. Anyways, while I was in there, I met a girl, and I've always known that I was attracted to women. That was never an issue. I was always very open about that. But there was one that was attracted to me, and she wanted to date me. So I kind of it was a thing that we went through, But she knew that I was also talking to a guy on Team 2. And anyways, so by the time we graduate, both of them had already proposed to me, and I chose to be with the male because it's just easier in society, and my parents, and just everything, right? So I'm with him when we get out of military school, and he moves in with me down in Decatur, and he was from Chicago, and he's Latino, and so we get pregnant pretty quickly. I want to say 3 months after we got out, we were pregnant. But he had already proposed to me. We had plans on joining the military together, he wanted to be in the Marines. I wanted to be in the Air Force. We met in the middle and decided we'll go Army, right? So we were getting ready for Army, and we were on our way to MEPS the next week, and my recruiter calls me, and I'm like, yeah, so we're gonna wait because I'm pregnant. And sadly, neither of us joined the forces, right? I think that my kids definitely have saved my life many times over the course of their lives. But when I found out I was pregnant at 17, I just bawled. I was crying. I didn't plan this. I didn't even want kids. And however, her dad was so excited. He was calling his mom, and she was so excited. And my mom was in the hospital with her second heart attack, and I went to see her, and she was all drugged up, but she was like, "This is a gift from God," and I'm thinking, what? She is high, and so I was really upset for a couple days, and then my spirit really worked on me, and that was another turning point in my life where I was like, what are you going to do? What decision are you going to make? What kind of parent are you going to be if you're going to be a parent? Because I was thinking of going to a clinic, I didn't know. I didn't know what to do, but my spirit told me, nope, you're going to be a mom, and you're going to suck it up, and you're going to do what you got to do, just like you did in military school, right? So that's what I end up doing. Me and him get involved in cocaine and dabbled in that a little bit. He always smoked marijuana. I never really liked it, even though I had tried it in high school and stuff. It's just not for me, so that's something that I've never like to be around. However, everyone around me, my friends, my family, whoever, they always smoked marijuana. So it was kind of a non-shocker there, you know. We had started using cocaine before I found out I was pregnant. Once I found out I was pregnant, I immediately never touched it again. I never picked up another cigarette because I was smoking cigarettes. And obviously I wasn't drinking. I don't even think I really drank caffeine with my first pregnancy. And after she was born, man, that was another testimony of, you know, just God and his miracles. And when I took one look at her, and I had went through 21 hours of labor, and then they decided to give me a cesarean. And I was like, okay, whatever you got to do, if that's the safest thing, then okay. And her dad was just bawling his eyes out, and he was like, I don't want to lose you. I don't know if you should do this. You know, we were young. We didn't know any better. And I just, you know, I was like, oh, stop being silly. Like, they're doctors. They know what they're doing. So anyways, he was in the room when, you know, they cut me open and got the baby out, and he cut her umbilical cord, and, you know, he was the first one to hold her after the doctor. And I just remember his eyes were so big, like and just his pupils were dilated. You could tell he was immediately in love with her. And that is a picture I never want to lose in my mind. I took one look at her and was like, please don't have red hair, because I grew up with red hair and freckles, and again was picked on relentlessly. So I didn't want her to have to go through that. I took one look at her, and she had dark curly hair, and I was like, oh, okay. And so I was finally able to go to sleep. So I had been up for like 2 days, right? And I was so tired. But they gave her to me, and she was the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen. And I've had many people, many adults, tell me that about her when she was little. I remember one of my favorite aunts telling me just how beautiful she was, and how newborn babies aren't supposed to look like that. They're not supposed to be that beautiful. She really was. And so me and him go home, and we're learning how to be parents together. And we're so poor. We can barely afford our rent. We don't know how we're going to do this. I was oblivious and ignorant to any type of community resources or anything like that. Again, I grew up in a village, and my parents, you know, they made decent money. My mom worked for the state, and my dad was a union carpenter. And it was hard for us. And there was somebody that reached out, I think, to my mom to help me go back to work. I was going to need a babysitter. And over the summer, her daughter was home from college, and she suggested, you know, her daughter watch my daughter, and so I can work, right? And so that ends up happening. And they fell in love with my daughter, of course. And so her godparent to this day is the mom of the girl who watched her. And they've watched her grow up. My daughter is now 18. he My son is 16, and me and their dad split up for a while before I had Isaiah. That's my son. My daughter's name is Mariah. Before I had Isaiah, me and him had split up for like, I'm not even kidding, 6 months or something. But as soon as he was born, he again took one look at his son and wanted to be with me again. And so each time I was pregnant, like, I wasn't drinking, smoking, using drugs, anything like that, but there would start to come a time that after they were born that we would be like, okay, we can continue to party now, you know. And so we would get a babysitter, we would party, you know, all night, and then eventually, you know, get our children back. And it was just a cycle for a while. When I had my son, though, I decided, you know, I'm just done with that. Like, I'm a mom. I'm not just a one child parent. I'm responsible for these lives of these kids, and whether or not you want to be responsible, I have to be. So I started trying to get my life together, and he was angry about that. He was unable to just stop. At this point, I think it had become a problem for him, and he hid it from me for a while. So things got really strained between us emotionally and physically. We just weren't good for each other, and we eventually split up for good. I was bitter for many, many years because I was like, God, you gave me these two beautiful, wonderful children with a man that I was absolutely head over heels in love with, and you took him away, or you let him leave. Like, I couldn't understand. I never wanted to be a single mom. Like, and I was bitter because, you know, I had these kids for him, and, you know, and for God, and I felt like they both just had left me. And so again, I put on my big girl pants and learned how to be a single mom. That was hard navigating over the years. There's so many things that my kids missed out on. Like vacation. They've never known what a vacation was until, you know, they went with their dad eventually and his wife. I could never afford to get their school pictures. I could never afford to get professional pictures. It was hard. I would save the money that I got back from my taxes, and since, you know, I was so poor and had children, I would get back a refund. So I would get like $6 to $7 grand back, and I would save that money, or I would give it to, my landlord, and I would pay my rent up for a year to make sure that I could make it. So one year I had to buy a new car, and so we really struggled because money was tight, but I had to. I put myself through technical school while I was working. I was working full time. I was going to school full time. So what I would do is I would wake up in the morning, get Mariah ready. This is before I had Isaiah. I would get Mariah ready. I would take her to daycare. I would go to school for 8 hours. I would come and get Mariah, go home with her. I would sleep for an hour or two, and I would try and get her to, take her nap with me. Sometimes she didn't. So she would just be in her crib, just... My daughter was very, very sweet, very positive, so full of joy. So it was hard, not being able to spend that much time with her. I would, after my nap and being able to spend a little bit of time with my daughter, I would take her back to daycare, and then I would go work 4 to midnight as a front desk to a hotel. And then afterwards, I would go pick her up, go home, go to sleep. So I would be waking Mariah up at midnight or a little after, bring her home, have to put her back to sleep. And I did this while I was pregnant. And so Juan wasn't around during this time. Oh, I just slipped and said his name. Don't sue me, sir. It was just really hard. When I had my son, I just wanted to be at home. But I had already gone through the program and gotten a job. It was a pharmacy technician program where they helped us to get licensed, certified, correct schooling, stuff like that. And they were like, you're going to get out making like $12 an hour. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because I have to take care of these kids. And the minimum wage at the time was $8 an hour. So I go to the Walmart pharmacy, and he offers me the position of a pharmacy technician 2, which that's just because I was certified, right? And it was $8.90 an hour. Yeah. So even though I was sad about it, I knew it was a good thing that I needed to do this, right? So I worked there at the pharmacy for about 5 years or so. Again, just struggling as a single mom. And their dad led me on for a few years about us, getting back together or whatever. Mind you, he had already had another child with his young girlfriend, and he was telling me this stuff, and he was still, sleeping with me. And so, my heart was attached to him for a very long time. And it wasn't until I got with someone else that I wanted to devote my time to that I finally stopped that foolishness with him. So, I decide, this money's not cutting it. I was promised more. I know I can do school because I was a 4.0 there at the technical school. And I was like, I know I can handle this, right? So I decided to go to college. And I get accepted to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. So that's my plan. That's where I'm going to go, right? I moved to the village that I grew up in, into an apartment building that is hooked on to, it's just a big warehouse building. One half was a bar and the other half was an apartment, right? And so my dad let me move into that apartment with my kids, my 2 kids, and we were there for a bit, a couple years, I think. And then when I was accepted to SIUE, I told my father, like, hey, I'm gonna go do this. And everybody was pretty supportive in the beginning, and so that's what I did. I went down to SIUE, and when I got my acceptance letter, I didn't know how I was going to pay for school, where I was going to live, how any of it worked. I didn't know nothing. All I knew was God was on my heart telling me, like, this is something you're going to do. And so my faith was really strong then, because, like I had said, once I had my daughter, I started going back to church, and I found the one non-denominational church that I just loved and have been a part of for over 20 years, right? The pastor is very knowledgeable. He's fluent in Hebrew and Greek and I think Aramaic. I'm not sure. Anyways, he was always so full of knowledge, and that every time my sister and I would go to church with my 2 kids and her daughter, they were the same age-ish, we would just get filled up with the Spirit. We were able to worship and just really soak in that love and learn and just learn, So I am very thankful for that. I loved it so much, and I was so strong in my faith at that point that I wanted to become a minister as well. So they had this ministry school on Monday nights. So it was one night a week. So I was going to, from Edwardsville, Illinois, drive 2 hours to go to this class and then 2 hours back once a week to do this. However, I had just been put in a class that was critical thinking, basically 101. It was 108, but you get it. And it was about logic. And I had a wonderful teacher. And at first, like, my brain just was not getting it. It was like just speaking a whole different language, And then when the teacher really broke everything down to the whole class, and he told the whole class, most of you are going to get D's and F's on your first test, right? And so I just studied my butt off, and sure enough, I got a D. So I was devastated. I'm like, how am I not getting this, And so once he broke it down for the class again, my brain finally clicked, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, okay, this makes sense. So logic is like, we were learning about fallacies and the premise, and if this is true, then this has to be true, and if this isn't true, then it can't be true, and blah, 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 right? So I also was given an assignment to do a paper, and it was an argumentative paper, okay? And I decided to do it on school curriculum because at this point I had been in college for, I think, at least a semester or two. And I decided to do this paper on the curriculum because I realized that there's so much truth that they do not teach us in school, in, elementary to middle school to high school. You don't learn some of the most major important facts of, one, our nation, two, the public policies, right, that we all have to either abide or whatever. And I just was beside myself, like, why? Right? So I start digging into this. Why don't we learn the truth about what we did to the Native Americans? Why don't we learn about the truth of the disparity between class and race and just, socioeconomic statuses? I didn't get it. So I just dove into that head first and realized I was a sociology major at that time because my blood just boiled learning about everything that, the winners keep from you. So the winners write history, right? That's where I'm getting that from. And I started learning from the bottom up instead of the top down. And also, when this happened, I started realizing the Bible isn't logical, right? God's laughing right now because faith isn't supposed to be logical. That's the whole point of faith. And I didn't get it. I didn't get that for 10 years. 10 years I struggled without Jesus. And he had become my best friend to where, I'm in constant prayer in my head, in my heart, in my car, just, in constant. That he was the only thing keeping me going as a single mom that was trying to do all this, right? I went down to Edwardsville with $1,000 in my pocket one day. Within that day, I found an apartment to be able to go to school, and I paid. It was exactly $1,000, but it was all utilities, and everything. So it was a nice little place. So I gave them my only $1,000. Here you go. Just to make it down to Edwardsville to be able to go to school. I went to school on no money. I mean, I got scholarships, mind you. But like I said, I would use that money to pay my rent while I was in school. And I would just live off of food stamps. And any little bit of money here and there that, my parents would give me, which wasn't very often. And I think I was getting child support at this time, so I was getting $75 a week, y'all, for 2 kids. That money was my gas money back and forth to their daycare and school. Like, I didn't go anywhere else unless somebody else was driving. Anyways, when I get to Edwardsville, I'm pretty smart by this time to know if I'm going to make it in this area with no resources, no family, and stuff like that as a single mom, I need to be a part of some kind of community that's going to keep me here, right? So I decide to look at the sororities, right? And I went through what they don't call it rush anymore. We call it recruitment. And I went through, there was 3 different sororities you would choose from, but they also had to choose you, right? So they had to offer you a bid, and you had to, claim that you wanted to be a part of them. So I only wrote one sorority down on my card. And that was the only sorority that wanted to give me a bid. And it was challenging at first because it was over 150 girls. The oldest one there was 28, and I was 24 at the time. So she took me under her wing, and at first there was a lot of pushback from the younger girls because we were expected to go to frat parties, and they would call them mixers, and go to formal and informal and be a certain way, right? Attract boys and drink is basically, what you think of. And so I had told this girl, the 28-year-old, when I was going through recruitment, I am not here for parties or boys or anything like that. I am here because I want to better myself, and I want to be around women who also want to better themselves and are held accountable, right? And so she fell in love with me, thank goodness. And we're still friends to this day. She she's one of my really closest friends, and we haven't spoken in a while. I'm gonna have to reach out to her. But wow, I just seen 2 cardinals fly up into my tree. And I've been watching David Alexander's YouTube because I get my endowment tomorrow, and I'm trying to take in everything that's out there about the temple and just how to experience it the best way that you can for yourself, right? And so I hope maybe he'll see this one day and be like, oh, that's cute. That's cool, 2 cardinals, Anyway. So I get some pushback from the younger girls that they're like, she's never at the mixers, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay. So I had their dad take my kids every weekend so that one weekend out of the month I would be able to go and party with these girls and just let loose and stuff like that, right? Well, then it was a problem because the other half of the girls were like, don't you have kids? Why are you here? And it was just a mess, right? Plus, I had just left Springfield, and one of the points in doing that was because I was going to the bar 2 to 3 times a week. Like, it was pretty moderate. So I decided, when I'm going to go to school, I'm going to better myself. I'm going to stop drinking. Anyways, by the time I'm in the sorority for the 2nd year, they've left me alone about, my kids, if I do come out or if I don't, if I'm at chapter, which was every Sunday evening, we would have to dress up and, meet and do all of our things. Sometimes we would have rituals that were, sacred to us and special. And some Sunday evenings we would have what we called dress down. So we would just come in like PJs and just like, be social with each other. So that was actually the best thing for me while I was there, because I really had to look at myself inside and from outside, with others, being so critical of me. And my sorority, you had to keep a 3.0 or higher to be able to be in it. You had to do philanthropy work. So I volunteered. I went to a battered women's shelter and, pampered the women, gave the kids gifts for Christmas. We have two specific philanthropies that we are a part of, and one of them is 65 Roses, which stands for cystic fibrosis, and so we try to fight that. We also have one called His Kids, where we take baskets to children in the hospital to kind of brighten their day. We also do ANAD, which is anorexia nervosa and associated disorders. So we would volunteer and donate and hold charity events and stuff for these things. So those were important to me, because that charity has always been, something on my heart. As a follower of Jesus, it should be, right? So, and these girls that I got close with really helped me get through some of the toughest days. Finals, a day where geese wouldn't let me in my dorm. Just so many good memories. And even though it can be problematic for some people to have that much freedom at a young age, because most of them are 18 and stuff, I do think it's an experience that everyone should go through. And it could look different for everyone, but it definitely taught me a lot, and I loved my time there. So after I finished my sophomore year there, I moved back to the village and the apartment that I was in, because I couldn't afford to pay my rent for the summer, because during the summer they don't give you financial aid. And I wasn't working at this time, because as my studies got harder and my kids are growing up, I'm missing so much, and I realized I just couldn't do it. So I end up letting a job go in the pharmacy there at Walmart in Collinsville, Illinois. And I call the manager up to let her know, like, I can't do this, and to thank her for the opportunity, because I know she really tried to help me, and she just chewed me out. And I just, I got off the phone and I just bawled. Like, I thought here I was doing, the adult thing and letting that I'm thankful and I'm sorry and I'm leaving, instead of, just and anyways, so that has stuck with me to this day. So I still have a hard time giving 2 weeks to an employer if I decide that's something I need to do. I'm going to grab another water right here. 1 second. Anyhow, so I couldn't stay in the apartment that I was in. Oh, it's such a lovely little apartment. It was a 2-bedroom. My kids loved that. This is where my son starts going to pre-K, and I don't know if I had realized it or not, but the pre-K that I had him in Troy, Illinois, lovely town. The pre-K was faith-based, and I really don't think I knew that for a while. But my son just thrived there, and I was so happy for him. And, you know, I'm trying to do all my stuff. My cat's meowing. Be quiet, Poe. However, my daughter was having a really... Now my dog's over here. Go lay down, please. Yes, I love you. Yep. Go lay down. Go lay down. Good girl. My daughter was having a really hard time, and I didn't know how to help her. Except the school had offered like tutoring, and so I put her in that, and she still wasn't doing very well in that. Anyways, so that's over, right? Because we're moving back to the Springfield area. And, well, the village that I lived in, it was called Thayer. And it was right next to Burden, which is where the school is. So that's the school that I went to. And so when we were in the apartment, my kids were going to Burden, and they did really well there as well. And so I was there for a few years, and during this time I met or rekindled a connection with a single dad. And all I knew about him was, you know, from growing up with him. He was in the next town over. That he was a great guy. He was funny. And he was faithful. He was a faithful man to who he was with. And so I decided to give him a chance, and we meet up, and he just falls head over heels in love with me quickly, and I am scared. So scared, because my heart's just been broken, you know, so many times. I wasn't quite as ready as he was, but I prayed. I was like, Lord, if you're putting this man in my life for a reason, please let him be my husband. And so 2 years go by. We're still together, and he makes a comment that he never wants to get married again because he had been married previously. And my spirit was so sad. My heart was really hurt, and I was like, look, we have to have a talk. I do want to be married one day, and I take it very seriously because, you know, my parents split up, and I've seen how that's, you know, affected me and my brother and them and the whole surrounding family. And marriage is just a covenant with, you know, you and Heavenly Father, and I take it very seriously. But if you don't want to get married, I don't know if we should still be together. And so that was a big shocker for him, I think. He wasn't expecting that from me, I guess. And so he thought about it, I think, for a couple days, and then he sat down on the bed and he said, "Do you want to do this?" And I'm like, "What?" And he was like, "Do you want to get married?" And I was like, "Are you asking me?" And he was like, "Yes." And I just bawled, you know. I'm such a crier. You'll come to know this. I just bawled. So we get married, and we were together for 8 years. Yeah. Married 6, I think. Anyways. He also was someone I just felt so safe with. Like, I didn't have a burning passion of love for him, but I did love him because he made me feel safe. And I had been in relationships that just were not healthy, and so this was a healthy one. And so I thought, this is where I need to be, this is who I need to be with. And so I loved him, and he was my best friend for those years, and we barely fought, you know. However, he started sneaking my children's medication, which was Ritalin, behind my back. And I was so naive. I didn't understand it. I was in denial at first. So the first few months that they like kept coming up short, I was like, am I giving them to them twice on accident because I forget? Or like, I was just trying to make sense of it. Didn't want to think, you know, this thought that he was taking them. And so eventually I realized, I think this is like 4 or 5 months, you know, before I'm like, okay, something fishy's going on, you know. So I confront him and ask him, and he just blows up on me, blames me, says I probably take them because I used to do cocaine, so it's got to be me, right? And he left, went to his sister's house for a few days before I begged him back and said, you know, I'm sorry for the way I confronted you. I didn't mean to make you so upset. I need to know what's going on. And he finally told me, yes, it's him. He's stealing them. He has a problem now. And so we start looking into treatment, right? And he goes to the ARC in Springfield and does a 28-day program thing. He was supposed to stay longer, but he missed me a lot, and I missed him. The kids missed him. He was a wonderful dad to my kids for a long time. In the end, not so much, but that's because his addiction just got worse, and we would argue about that, and you know, my kids would have to see that and deal with it. And so I know my daughter had lost respect for him. It showed, you know, and so he didn't like her, she didn't like him. stuff like that. He spread many lies about a lot of things, and he ended up leaving for another woman. And I was really hurt, because here I keep trying with you every few months to go to therapy, go to substance abuse counseling, go to marriage counseling. I keep trying. I keep trying. I do not want my marriage to end, right? Because I really believe it's a sacred thing. And he just told me straight up, I'm tired of being unhappy. And I thought he was happy, besides dealing with that problem. And so he didn't face that. I don't know if he ever did. I hope so. But again, I fell apart for a little while. And again, he was leading me on to believe he wanted to be a better husband, and he was still sleeping with me while he was sleeping with her, and I was so naive. She found out a few times, and then I had a bunch of blowback from his family that I need to leave her alone, and we weren't even divorced yet, and she was living in my home that I put the down payment on. That it just, anyways, at this time I feel like I've lost pretty much most faith in guys, and so I get a job at the hospital in Springfield, and I worked as a patient transporter for a little over a year, I think, and then I worked as a telemetry technician for about a year or so. And right when we split up, right, and I decided, it's time for me to get a different place and stuff like that, and life to be different. I was getting my taxes back, and again, because I have children, I was getting so much back. But I told him, I said, look, I know we're splitting up and it isn't going to work and stuff like that, but you have helped me, this whole year, helped me raise my kids, helped me with things, and so I want you to have half of it. And he was a little kind of demanding about it, but I wanted him to be able to have that, so that we both could part and be okay. And it sort of happened, but I fell apart, like I said, emotionally. But I started working at the hospital, and I'm working 10-hour days, I think. Yeah. No. Just kidding. They were 8 hours Monday through Friday, and sometimes on weekends. And so it was taking my mind off everything, which was great, But I would be so exhausted when I got home, because as a patient transporter, we would have we would track our steps or whatever, and we would do on average 20,000 steps a day. So I think it's roughly like 7 or 8 miles. I would be so exhausted, and I would have to peel my clothes off because they were just soaking wet with sweat. And so I learned early on, because I'm a bigger girl, that I had to wear an undershirt and um, under shorts so that my thighs wouldn't rub and chafe and cause blisters because I'm walking so fast, trying to get my runs done. So I would just be so sweaty by the time I got home, so exhausted. All I wanted to do was sleep. So I didn't spend much time with my kids during this time. Although I was not in school because I'm just worried about paying bills at this point, and brokenhearted and trying to heal. And so I get a second job, which is overnights. And I had a roommate come and stay temporarily with me, and they would watch my kids. They would just be there while they slept, so I could go and be a DSP, a direct support professional, caregiver, stuff like that, for the elderly and disabled. So I would take 12-hour shifts, but I would take like 2 or 3 a week so that I could see my kids sometimes. During this time, my daughter, she has always been so sweet and so kind and just so loving that she gets jumped by an older girl from the back. And it's all on video. It's all over Snapchat. It's all over, And my poor baby was so scared. Didn't know how to fight. Just trying to cover, her head to defend herself. And it's not until her younger brother, who is a lot smaller than this girl, pushes this girl off of my daughter, that she stops just hitting her. And so I call the police and I give them the video. And so I think she, got some probation or something. I'm not 100% sure. But, like, who does that? And I was sure thinking, like, what kind of parent? I was so angry. So angry. And my daughter has never been the same since. Since that happened, she's very... She's hard now. Like, she's been in so many fights. She don't care. She's going to tell you the truth, whether you like it or not. I mean, I am somewhat proud of her because, she's in Springfield and the culture there is different, obviously. And she had to kind of harden herself. But it breaks my heart that she had to and still has to be that way. My son has always been a mama's boy, and he always used to just bug his sister. They were always arguing, and I thought back to me and my brother, always arguing. Yeah. Anyways, he was such a mama's boy, and okay, this is where my story gets really hard. I meet Roberto. And we met online. And we just started texting back and forth for a few days. And we just clicked so well. So well. Now, mind you, I had not been with anybody for a long time because I was so heartbroken. We both fell for each other. Probably our first date. Our first date was to go see Rob Zombie's 3 from Hell. And he asked me if his friends could come, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. But he meant a friend, and that friend's, I don't know if they were dating, but they were, we'll just say they were dating. And we had such a blast. He was a tattoo artist, and he's so funny. He's Mexican, but he's lived, I think, in Illinois most of his life. And it was just so fun getting to know him. And I also fell in love with his friends, right? But he told me from the beginning, he said, look, I live in a sober house. And my sobriety is the most important thing to me. And we're told not to date for years after we're sober, you know. He said, I've been sober for 5 months and I can't go back, or it will literally kill me. And I need you to understand that I'm going to put this priority before you. And his honesty and authenticity made me love him even more. So, for many months, he lived in the sober house, and I would go see him before work and after work and spend time with him. And eventually he decides to move in with me. And I also just thought it was so genuine when he told me, you know, how open he was, and he's actively working on himself. He's going to meetings. He's trying to better himself and his situation, and be a dad to his kids, and right all his wrongs, right? And go to church. And at that point, that was when I wasn't, that was part of my 10 years in the wilderness, right? And but after having gone through everything I did with my first husband, I was proud of him, you know, and I wasn't scared of it. I appreciated the fact that he is getting help and he is doing what he needs to do, right? So he moves in with me, and he's doing tattoos at this point. I think like 1 or 2 people maybe a day or every 2 days, right? And to make money. And everybody loved him. He's just so fun to be around, you know? And So Christmas comes and we're going to go meet his mother, and he gives me my Christmas presents, and I had never ever and since haven't got as much jewelry as I did that Christmas. And he just loved me so much. We went to meet his mom, and he would talk so negatively about her that I really didn't want to meet her. But when I met her, she was nice and they got along great. And so I was like, I thought you didn't like her that much, you know? And he told me, he said, well, for one, she's an addict, and because I'm sober, I have to stay away from certain people in my family or I will relapse. And so obviously telling them I can't be around them, you know, doesn't feel good. But I can't, because I'll die. And so I just kind of took everything with a grain of salt when it came to his family. Like, when he would talk bad about them and stuff, I knew, like, at this point, I get to know him well enough to know he's bipolar. And so, like, you either hate them or love them, you know. That's how he seen it. And I meet his brother, and he was wonderful. His wife was wonderful. I met his daughter, and she was a little reserved, I think. And I don't know all the history with him and her and the family and stuff like that, but we got to a point where we were pretty close. So I thought, and Roberto starts using air duster, and I've never heard of that before, but it's like, you know, the stuff you spray on your keyboard to get the dust out of it and stuff, and people huff it and it gives you some kind of high, right? And so I didn't know what it was, and the way he explained it is, well, it's basically like whippets, which I thought were harmless. I don't know. I've never done them. And so he relapses, and when he was on air duster, he was a completely different person. Completely different person. He was angry and hostile and violent and mean. He was so mean. And he would seize, like, and it was terrifying to watch. So at this point, you know, he's living with me and my kids, and I would be at work, and I would work 12-hour shifts, and my son would call me crying, scared, because he was using air duster. So I would have to leave my job, come home, take care of Roberto, because when he was using that stuff, he would fall a lot. So I would just have to, like, hold his head or hold him and just let him, because there were times I tried to hide it and he got violent with me. I would try to, while he was passed out from seizing, I would try and shoot the air out of it quicker so that he couldn't use as much. And again, he would just be violent about it. So I got to a point where I was like, if you're gonna do this, I have to be there to make sure you don't hurt yourself, you know. And it was so bad. One day, we had gotten, he went back to the sober house, actually, because of it. Because I asked him to. And he did. He went back. So during that time, like, we're still together, but we're not, you know? And I would just wait on him to call me. And he would every now and again, you know? And I was just kind of waiting to see, you know, if he's going to be okay and stuff like that. But I still cared about him deeply. During this time is when COVID hits. I am on an intermediate floor, which means higher than general, but not quite ICU. It's like in between. And so my floor is crazy busy. It's just nuts. It's a madhouse, right? And COVID hits, and the nurses are so scared because our hospital got the very first COVID patient in the United States, I think. If not, it was the first one in Illinois. Okay. I was so scared because, you know, like, I'm looking stuff up. I'm looking at the map of how it's spreading day by day. And I'm seeing our rooms fill up. And then also the turnover rate was drastic. So I'm seeing people just die on my screen because I watched heartbeats, right? And I was just seeing people go left and right, and I was so scared. I was so scared I was gonna catch something. I was scared I was gonna bring it home to my kids. I was so scared that, like, my anxiety was so bad, like, I couldn't sleep, right? And so this is when I decide I'm going to try an edible. Because I had been going to the doctor all my life, have been, still do. And they could never figure out the right medication or anything like that. So I gave up and was like, I'm going to try an edible. And it worked for me. It calmed me down for the first time in like 3 months. I was so, you know, terrified that it worked. And I got into a program for mental health. It was like a Zoom thing, class with other people. And the psychiatrist there, you know, he hears my story. He tells me edibles are fine. You can, I suggest them over, you know, some medication that can give you a bad reaction or whatever, side effects. And so for a while, I'm eating edibles and I'm selling marijuana. I don't know how that came to be, honestly, but I start making really good money. And so I move into a house with my 2 kids, right? And things are looking up. I get a new vehicle. I buy a second vehicle to have. And so when this happens, Roberto is like, I'm ready to come back, you know. So I let him come and move in. And things are going so well, so well, so well between us. Um, one of the rooms we made his tattoo studio in, and he was getting a lot of business, and I was getting a lot of business. Plus, I was still working at the hospital. So we were doing so good. And his mom was having an issue with where she was living, I think. I don't know. But I suggested to him, I said, why don't you let her come stay here? Not thinking, you know. And she came. She was not nice to my children. And she was on, I think, oxycodone or something, and she would get a huge bottle of like 180 and it would be gone in a couple of days. That was how bad it was, and I didn't realize. Like, I had forgot that Roberto told me, like, I can't be around certain family. Well, he had a toothache, and she gave him a pill, and that sent him down a downward spiral. She would speak Spanish to him and talk trash about me right in front of my face. Probably my kids too, I don't know. And all I ever did was just try to love them. You know, love her, love the rest of the family. Roberto was also schizoaffective, so he would have schizophrenia fits, and he would blame me of the craziest things, like I don't even want to say it, it's so gross. That I had a friend over and she was coloring my hair, and my kids were running in and out of the house, whatever, they're preteens at this point, and he comes in to the room where we are, and she's literally doing my hair, and he's like, really? How could you do that to me? And I was like, what? And I had no idea what he was talking about. But he got on the same program I was on for mental health, and they were trying a medication for him. And so he starts having these like schizophrenia fits, and he blamed me of going down on this girl and in front of my children and showing them how to do it correctly. This poor girl never came back to my house. Like, we were just becoming friends. She's super cool. And so, anyways, he would do stuff like that. He relapsed on alcohol during this point. I got him sober. I had to hide little shooters, you know, the little bottles of alcohol. I had to hide them around the house. And every 2 hours, I would text him a new location of one. And I finally get him sober after a few days, you know. And he tells me he wants to go back to an actual inpatient rehab. And I was like, okay, you know, thank you. Of course I will support you in that. I take him to the church camp, and I baptize him. I have him baptize me, and then we baptize my son and daughter together in this lake. And we also said our vows to each other, and just had a ceremony, you know. So we go back home. Things are still looking up, like he's still trying to get help. I realize like he's always gonna try, you know, and so I'm there for it. And he goes. Before he goes, he relapses on air duster, and I was so mad, so mad. That night, I went to the park with my children, and I sat there and drank a 6-pack of Reds by myself. And so I was pretty tipsy. It was right after I had got off work. I didn't even go home. I don't even think he realized my kids were gone, you know, because he was doing the air duster. And it was the day before he was supposed to go in to the rehab because they had to wait for his COVID test to come back and blah, 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 right? And so I thought, oh, he's not going to go. Like, this is a waste of my time. What am I, you know, all of that. So I am drunk at this point at the park with my 2 kids. And they're just telling me, like, Mom, it's okay. We love you. You need to let him go. Blah, 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 blah. You know, consoling me, the parent. And so I go home, and on the way home, I randomly text this guy that I met in college, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, you should let me come over. And he's like, do I know you? And I was like, nope. And anyways, I ended up sleeping with this guy. And I go back home, and Roberto took all of his stuff and left. And I thought it was over. And for 2 days, I was just upset and crying, you know. Here it goes again, blah, blah, you know. And then he finally calls me from rehab. And I was shocked. I was like, why? Why would you do that the day before you go? Like, I didn't think you were going to go. I was mad at you because you scare my children every time you do this. Like, you're going to die doing this stuff. Like, you've hit your head so many times and busted it open. Like, it was so scary watching him do that. And anyways, he gets through 30 days, and they put him on methadone because a friend of his suggested that he start taking that because it made him want to give up drinking. Like, he didn't even think about it. So he gets on methadone, and he comes home, and they just keep increasing and increasing and increasing his dose to where, like, we had started going to church, to the church that, you know, I was a part of for so long, and I was bringing him, and he was just nodding out in service. And I'm naive about that stuff. To this day, like, I don't really understand whatever. But he goes through my phone, and sees a message that I had sent, ironically, my kids' dad's wife, because we were friends at this point. A message saying, like, I slept with this guy, he's a teacher, like, la 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 la. And, she was like, well, girl, you need to be with him. Forget about Roberto because of what he's doing to you and stuff. And I had sent back, like, I just can't. Like, he's my heart and da 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 da. So he sees this message between me and her. And I'm sure he wanted to relapse. I'm sure. And we're arguing back and forth on the phone because he waited for me to fall asleep. He took all his stuff, left, and I didn't know where he was. So, he went to a sober house, thank the Lord, and just fought with me for like 3 days. But I was completely truthful. I let it all out. I told him everything. I'm human. I did this to hurt you and to comfort me, and I'm sorry. And it was hell for a little bit. And he eventually is like, I love you and I want to be with you. So you're going to delete your Facebook. You're going to get a different phone number. You're going, like, I need to know that, you're going to take steps to help my, insecurities about this. And I was like, absolutely, anything that you need, I'm here for you, and so I do all of this. He comes back eventually, and now we're in a new house. And while in this new house, we just loved each other, and he was doing so good. He did great until they kept increasing his methadone. But for a long time, we were going to church, and my kids, we were doing stuff with them, and he was getting a lot of business, and I was getting a lot of business, and he decides, like, we really need to live for Christ. And I knew he was right. I'm going to take my dog potty, so pause.